Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news at the dawn of the kickoff of the new season of 2025. Big rumours emerging again today as to how much time some of these teams have gained over their previous iteration. Yesterday we heard rumours McLaren have gained half a second on last year's car according to various sources and even discussions from McLaren themselves. Some rumours put Ferrari at a second faster than last year. Other rumours today put them at a far lower number than that. What does it matter going into next year when the drivers are thrown into the conversation as well? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Lots of other drama on the day as well. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. This image, of course, is from today's F1 75 event, which is coming up in just a couple of hours' time. I'm sure that it's going to be memorable for one reason or another right later on today. Before we get there, this is Esteban Ocon and his new helmet for the new season. I've got to say, Haas have honestly cooked up something this season. I hope their car is good because this is one of the sickest helmet. I don't usually get excited about this stuff. I genuinely don't really care what the race suits look like, what the helmets look like. It is what it is as far as I'm concerned. But this is fire, no? Like, okay, let's be real for a second. Like, Ocon's kind of cooked with this. The red with the white and the black. I mean, usually you'll see a bit more contrast, but no, they're sticking with those colours, Haas and Ocon, and I think it's going to go down a treat. Hopefully the car's good because they are making moves, Haas. This, I think, was in London today because, well, there's a London taxi, it seems, in the background here, and the O2 is literally in the background, so pretty obvious where this is. So, yes, this is a car, Formula 1 car, Aston Martin, as they're hyping up the launch event, which is happening in a few hours' time, and I'm sure that it's going to be interesting. They've obviously been gassing it up for the last couple of days. Jack Whitehall is hosting it, and all of the drivers and all of the team bosses are going to be there as well. It'll be interesting to hear from, let's say the likes of an Andy Cowell, who's basically decided himself he's going to take over that role as team principal of the Aston Martin team. There's going to be musical performances, and yeah, that's about that. I don't imagine many of the drivers are that enthralled about this. This is from an account called Motorsport Quotes. Now, it's a parody account. None of these quotes are actually real, although, to be fair, he does quite a good job that some of them do seem believable. But he did this tweet yesterday. Several F1 drivers have reportedly refused to attend F1 75 Live after the announcement that Jack Whitehall will host the event and Machine Gun Kelly will perform at halftime. I am not wasting my time on that, said an anonymous driver. Now, this is a parody comment. It's not actually true, but it is believable, and apparently Max Verstappen's official account liked this tweet yesterday. You can no longer see likes on Twitter, but if the person who posted the tweet then reposts it, you will find the following. So yeah, apparently Max liked this post, thought it was pretty funny, and I think Max will, unfortunately for him, be dragged along there. I saw yesterday Max's plane, his private jet, has its own Twitter account, not run by him, but it tracks where it is, and yesterday it was spotted that yes, Max had touched down just north of London. So, yeah, looks like he will be there this evening, I'd imagine. Jack Doohan will likely, well, he will be there this evening as well. He, of course, is being quizzed because today, before everything gets underway this evening, they did a round of press conferences, pretty much for the first time this season, getting the drivers in front of the media. And, of course, Doohan was asked the question, are you getting replaced by Franco? What's going on there? And he says, no, I'm not worried about it. I've been told that he's the reserve driver. Whatever pressure there might be, I look forward to enjoying that, embracing it, and just enjoying my Formula 1 season, or, my Formula 1 race, or races, or a handful of races, or whatever, because it doesn't seem like he's going to last the test of time, unfortunately. This is another reason why today it was confirmed by Alpine they have a new sponsor, Mercado Libre, or I don't know, it would be Libre in French, whatever, I don't know, it's Latin American anyway. They are a partner that they're bringing in, and they are one of the main backers of Franco Colapinto. So, yes, they have a partnership deal with Alpine now, so congratulations to them. I'm sure it's nothing to do with Colapinto getting involved in the team, as, Jeppe here says, companies don't usually sign large sponsorship deals for reserve drivers, just saying. So I think Doohan is cooked is the bottom line here. Now, another big update on the day coming out of the F1 Commission. They confirmed a number of changes, some of which, of course, the technical directive that's coming soon, but two big things that I wanted to highlight today. The first one is on the number of gearboxes. In previous years, there's been limits of, 4 or 5 gearboxes, something like that, in terms of how many they can use. Red Bull were always the team, certainly Adrian Newey, that really liked to push the limits of the size of the gearbox. He preferred a very small gearbox where possible that maybe would have reliability issues. Let's be real. That Red Bull gearbox the last couple of seasons, the downshifting and some of these other things has caused Verstappen problems. Of course, it was even the very first ever race of the 2022 cycle in Bahrain when Red Bull double DNF'd due to gearbox issues, right? So they do like to push the limits in that regard, but over the last couple of years, the reliability has got to a level where, according to F1, they no longer need to mandate the maximum number of gearboxes. This is interesting because the teams, if they wanted, could run a new gearbox every race. I guess with the idea being that you could make it really small and really light and then just chuck a new one in every Grand Prix because it's going to wear out if it's, let's say less reliable than it could be in terms of the design. But of course, now there's the cost cap. So as a team, you're not going to make 24 gearboxes and run them for 24 races. That's not going to happen. So the point is, I guess, from F1 that they don't expect the team to change much. And they were so reliable in terms of performance and execution, in general anyway, that there wasn't really too much of an issue. Like gearbox failures, pretty rare nowadays in modern Formula 1. So F1 have decided use as many as you like because it's probably not going to make much difference, which is probably a big deal in terms of, it's a big deal execution-wise. Wow, it's gone from a limit to no limit at all, but is it going to make any difference? Probably not. Something that will definitely make a difference is the following. The F1 Commission has approved a plan to increase the number of mandatory pit stops in Monaco for the upcoming year. Now, Monaco was a disaster of a race last year, apart from the fact that Charles Leclerc won, which was epic, obviously. But it was the only race, I think, ever where the top 10 drivers finished in the order in which they started. Of course, it wasn't helped by the crash at the start between Magnussen and Perez. The safety car comes out. They pull into the pits, they put on the new set of tyres, and they drive around very slowly until the end of the Grand Prix. But this is something that I've been calling for a long time. I actually think that they could do this for every single Grand Prix. I'm sure you guys remember the Qatar Grand Prix, which was, the tyre deg, not even tyre deg, the tyre destruction that was being caused by the curbs around Qatar and the incredible heat meant that they mandated a 3-stop strategy, you guys remember, in Qatar, which meant that all the drivers and teams were pushing flat out the entire time. That meant that many drivers, such as Stroll, nearly passed out. It was very hot. They also confirmed in this F1 Commission announcement today the plans for the cooling devices for the drivers in those type of conditions have been approved and will be coming as and when that is required. There's been some talk on that recently as well. But Qatar was fascinating because it was like going back in time when tyre degradation or tyre management wasn't a thing and the drivers would just push flat out lap after lap after lap in race conditions. That's how I kind of remember Formula 1 when I was a kid, and it's not like that nowadays, right? You start the race and for the first 12 laps they don't do anything and then the pit stops happen, so they drive a bit harder because they're trying to do the undercuts. You guys know how modern Formula 1 goes. So it's been a thought of mine for some time that, okay, what if we mandated every single tyre compound? This is how I would personally do it. Instead of saying, okay, you've got to have 2 stops, I would say you've got to use not just a soft and medium or a soft and hard or a hard medium, whatever, right? Currently they have to use 2 different tyre compounds. My change, if I could make one change to Formula 1, this is what I would do. I would mandate the use of the soft, medium and the hard tyre during a race, unless it's wet. Then, of course, do what you want, as always. So I've talked about this for years now, and it seems like they're basically going to do that for Monaco, or at least something similar. It seems like potentially 2 mandated pit stops will be necessary because the race needs some sort of spicing up. And the more pit stops, generally, the more entertaining a race. More different strategy options you can go for, more opportunities for something to go wrong, which is potentially a big deal as well in F1. And I do wonder that if this actually does happen, and Monaco is a 2-stop mandatory, whether that is guaranteed you have to use soft, medium, hard or whatever, they can do it in a number of different ways. People would also say, oh, just mandate them to use the soft. But honestly, if you mandated that they use the soft with the intention that the tyres will deg and therefore they'll have to pit more, I guarantee you the drivers drive around at 5 miles an hour. Whatever is the limit on, at least in Monaco, right? Whatever's the limit on the lap time discussion, right? Because you can't go too slow because there's rules on that. The drivers will drive at that limit and they will keep the soft tyres to the end. That is the best strategy. That's what the teams would do in that scenario, trying to keep those tyres alive. So this is the way to do it. And as I say that, if they're doing this for Monaco, it's, okay, Monaco's a strange Grand Prix. It's very unique nowadays. But if they're doing it for one Grand Prix, why not mandate this for more Grand Prix, right? It feels like only a matter of time. If there's other Grand Prix where they're not very entertaining, overtakes aren't really happening so much, then F1 might say, well, let's bring in the Monaco rule, right? And let's roll that out elsewhere. Would it be good for F1? I personally think so, but I understand why the purists will say, no, it should be some other way. Definitely an interesting conversation to be had. Speaking of that F1 development as well, it was also confirmed the technical directive that is being brought in, the changes to the flexibility of the front wings. Now, the race did an interesting discussion on this the other day, saying that effectively the limits of the flexibility by the flexibility based on the force applied is reducing by a third. So applying the same 1,000 Newton force that they typically use for the static load tests, it will only be able to flex by 10 millimeters rather than 15 millimeters in the ways that it is. And that's a pretty substantial change. The thing is that flexibility isn't necessarily linear, and the loads that the wings experience at very high speed is actually significantly more than they experiment with on the static load tests, because I think that's the maximum they can really do safely in a garage. If they do any more than that, they risk snapping the thing off basically anyway. So that's the issue. And it means that the teams, because like the flexibility is non-linear, it's possible that they can make their wing flex less in those 1,000 Newton conditions, but when it goes over that, they can design the compounds and the materials such that it actually flexes at high speed, similar to how it did last year. So there is a discussion as to how much difference this is actually going to make. The smart teams, and all teams are smart really, will probably find a way to make the wings flex nearly as much as they did before. So McLaren say they're not so worried about it. They think, it is what it is. They're not so worried about the new technical directive. But apparently Red Bull, there was discussion on that. Yeah, this tweet here from Giuliano on the same article when he says that the mood from McLaren on the fact that only a small tweak will be necessary is the opposite to Red Bull, who are very unhappy about it. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to keep your eyes on there as well. Before we get into the pace of the car stuff, bit of drama at the press conferences. Here's Russell, of course, at the F1 75 live press conference today with his teammate Andrea Kimi Antonelli next door. They were talking about a fair few things. The main one really, of course, was that Russell was quizzed on the situation with Max Verstappen. They got into it heavy at the end of last year, Qatar, and even rolled over into Abu Dhabi. And apparently they said that they kind of cleared the air after Abu Dhabi and said, okay, that was the season, next year we'll go again. And Russell doesn't exactly deny that. So I think it's very clear that Russell is intending to keep this beef alive to some level, right? Like he is clearly of the intention to not speak to Max Verstappen, as he says, and build up this rivalry even further. And I think it's probably a good thing for George to do if he is as good as he thinks he is. And, there's some debate on that. I think he's better than most people think he is, and that's a conversation for another day. I think what I'm hoping as a result of this is that the Mercedes and the Red Bull are actually solid cars this year, because if they are, we are going to have some fireworks. But yeah, this was the full quote here from Russell today, who said, I've got no intentions to speak to him, to be honest. That happened last year. I want to focus on myself. Things got out of line last year. That was then. We are not going to go back to being best mates, that's for sure. So yeah, very clear on that one, George Russell. And this was the statement that he even made not long ago now when he said that, basically Max was being a bit of a bully, he was pushing people around, somebody had to push back against it, and that's what he decided to do. He also mentioned, Russell, the issues with the Mercedes car and what they've tried to do to not fall into the same trap, because he actually says for the last few years, Mercedes, they discover a problem, they fix the problem, and then they create a new problem. And he believes, he is at least confident, that on the final year of these regulations, Mercedes will finally have got on top of that, and they can fix the problem, have a quick car, and actually it's quick everywhere, which has not been great as of late. But let's talk about some of the latest news on the new Ferrari. Now, we've seen rumours about this for some time. Year on year in a regulation cycle, the teams will hope to gain a second, if not more, certainly from year 1 to year 2. In the final year of the regulations, that gap is going to be significantly lower than it could be otherwise. We talked about it yesterday, though, that as far as I was concerned, McLaren talking about half a second, to me that would be about the minimum that you would hope to gain year on year, regardless of, obviously finally with the regulations, there's only so much you can improve, hitting the theoretical performance ceiling. And to be fair, 0.4 of a second isn't bad. It's still pretty good, but it might not be what other teams are going for in terms of the improvement year on year. So McLaren yesterday, they said, and people have equated it to roughly half a second, but Stella said, the team principal at McLaren, that the gain that they have made with their new car is equal to all of last year's upgrades put together again, right? So, and there was discussion that roughly last year McLaren gained half a second in terms of the upgrades they brought to the car over the course of the season, and maybe it could arguably a bit more given what happened in Miami last year and beyond. Whatever, that was the discussion there from McLaren, and people have equated to say, all right, roughly half a second they're looking at. Now, the other day there were rumours that Ferrari had gained a second, and Torini said, nah, there's nothing like that going on. Well, he didn't deny it, he just said you don't really know what that means compared to the other teams. And now some other sources in the Italian press are saying that on the simulator, the car is roughly 0.4 faster than the previous one, which, okay, it's reasonably significant, but it doesn't sound especially substantial to me. Now, this varies on many factors. Again, I mean, look, McLaren are talking 0.5, Ferrari are talking 0.4. Like, it's not a massive difference. And also, what tracks are they testing on? Is that 0.4 seconds at Fiorano? Is that 0.4 seconds at Monza? Because, if it is, not many corners at Monza. So, maybe that's quite significant. Austria would be very significant. But other circuits, it's not so significant, right? So, what does it mean? What do Ferrari base their tests on, right? Maybe McLaren base their numbers in their simulators on Silverstone or an average of some circuits. Ferrari might base theirs on Monza, right? Who knows? Like, the numbers are all very arbitrary and it's difficult really to analyse exactly what it does mean. But okay, let's take it at face value that next year's McLaren is going to be half a second faster than this year's, and next year's Ferrari is going to be 0.4 faster than this year's. If that's true, McLaren are probably winning the championship, right? Because they did have the faster car last season. But let's say the cars start on a level playing field and the McLaren is 1/10 faster than next year's Ferrari. Is that enough for Lando to win the championship, or for Oscar to win the championship, depending on your perspective there? That is the question, because I think there's absolutely an argument that this year's Ferrari may be inferior to the McLaren. I think if all of McLaren's risk, and it seems like they're taking some serious risk, if they all pay off, it would be a surprise if they're not the fastest car. Ferrari also taking risk, probably not quite as much as McLaren is our understanding. I guess we'll see news on that tomorrow. And it's plausible that some of the things that McLaren tried don't work as they intended. But let's say they do, the McLaren will be the quickest car, one would imagine. But equally, the Ferrari guys might be the better drivers, and I think that's why it's an interesting championship battle, right? Is that even if the McLaren is the marginally faster car, is Norris good enough versus Leclerc and Hamilton in that scenario to get the job done of the drivers? What about the constructors? Where does Max and the Red Bull fit into this whole equation? Very much intrigued to your perspective on all of it in the comment section below. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, enjoy the show this evening if you can. As I say, I think it's live on YouTube in a couple of hours. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. I said that before. Take care, and I'll see you next time.